to talk about it more is our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert.
Morning again, Allison.
Good morning, Doug. Could you just start by telling us more about this judge? Who is he, and what are some of the challenges he's facing?
Now, where do you even begin, Allison, with the challenges he's facing? Look, the families of the victims of this horrific blast are absolutely outraged. They are indignant. They are furious that 1 year, more than a year on from the explosions, still no one has been held accountable for what happened at the port. Now, you cannot blame the judge. His name is Tarek Bitar. He was appointed, actually, after his predecessor was removed from the investigation amid complaints of alleged bias. This is what all the judge, anyone trying to get to the bottom of this will be accused of bias. Now, you can't fault Tarek Bitar, the investigating judge now, for lack of effort. His efforts to try to summon for questioning both serving and former government officials, security officials, senior ministers, have been repeatedly denied and thwarted. That is, he has faced a relentless, and that's really the only word for it, a relentless smear campaign in a lot of Lebanon's press from the government and political establishment, and he has faced enormous pushback from senior Lebanese officials and politicians, those who would be in the crossfire of his investigation. Now, Bitar himself, very reserved. He's not allowed to actually speak to journalists. He's kept a very low profile, even though he is accused of bias by whichever factions are trying to protect their own interests here. He himself is the very reason he doesn't want to become a public figure, he doesn't want to become part of the story, is that he is trying to remain as impartial as ever, above the fray. This is proving extremely difficult to do in Lebanon, a country which has an extremely complex system of sectarian allegiances and parties and factions, everyone with their own sides, their own loyalties, and everyone seeing things through their own prism of what's their interest, what is this guy going to be after. He's been trying to get basic questions to where did the chemicals that were sitting in that port, which led to this horrific explosion, where did they come from? Where were they going? Why were they allowed to sit there in that port for 6 years or more? And knowing with knowledge on the part of politicians that they were potentially extremely dangerous and deadly. Who left them there? Negligence. There have been repeated attempts, like I said, ministers have filed recently, including the former caretaker prime minister of the country, filed complaints against him, trying to remove him from the investigation for bias. Lebanon's Court of Cassation, as it's called, which is sort of like Lebanon's Supreme Court, its highest court, basically have rebuffed, have turned down those requests to remove him. He has continued his work. He's been allowed to remain on. But to talk about obstacles, that's an understatement. That's putting it mildly. This is a judge who is really up against it in a political system whose establishment, it would appear, are determined to pull out all stops to shield themselves and to make sure that they do not have to answer or be held accountable or even have to be summoned for questioning by a judge.
And Doug, where are we in this investigation? Have any of those basic questions even been answered?
No, like I said, not a single question. It's not even like the questions right now outnumber the answers. There's about, 1,000,001 questions, and there's basically zero answers. Yes, they know that these chemicals were sitting there up to, 1,750 tons of these chemicals, a lot of which are believed to have exploded after a fire. They were ignited by a fire. We know, that there were thousands wounded in the blast. We know that vast swathes of Beirut were completely razed around that port area. We know that over 200 people were killed in the blast. But the problem is the negligence of it. How were those chemicals allowed to sit there? And this is really what the families want answers to. They want someone to be held accountable, because what they do know and strongly suspect, based on the evidence, is that officials did know those chemicals were there. Someone did let those chemicals remain there. Who was it? Why? What were the chemicals' actual purpose? What were they waiting for? Were they headed somewhere else? Were they going to stay in that port indefinitely? They just don't know. They want answers. They want investigation, which is one of the reasons, Allison, main reasons that Human Rights Watch, among others, there's been a joint letter signed by a lot of activists, a lot of families of the victims of this blast, calling for an international, perhaps a UN-led investigation, a tribunal of sorts, to really get answers, because they have zero faith in the ability of the Lebanese system to be able to apply the pressure needed and to get the results. They're not questioning the families, the impartiality of the judge, but they perhaps are questioning whether or not any judge within Lebanon's judicial system will have the capacity or the wherewithal to get to the bottom of what's proving to be an extremely plotting and an extremely difficult inquiry with endless pushback from the establishment.
Hopefully Lebanon can get answers and violence won't get worse before that. Douglas Herbert, thank you very much.